A reputation for himself as a fearsome man. He's a tough cookie. He's the guy who negotiated the ceasefire to end the Israeli military offensive in January 2009. He's the one who's mediating between Hamas and Fatah to breach some sort of, to pull together some sort of reconciliation agreement. And he's also a key mediator in trying to secure the release of that Israeli kidnapped soldier, Gilad Shalit. But there is an issue about this idea of him taking over as leader of the government, and that is under the current constitutional rules, any presidential contender must have been the member of or hold a senior ranking position in a political party for at least a year prior to election, and he is not a member of any political party. So this is what we're talking about, the need for constitutional reform, if indeed this plan, which the New York Times has mooted in today's paper, was indeed going to take effect.
OK, well, we just can see behind you that Friday prayers are taking place currently in Egypt and indeed, of course, in the capital, Cairo. And this could be a key juncture, really, for the protests today, because the mood could change
very easily. And the thing is after midday prayers, it's not just what's happening in Tahrir Square, but what's happening outside that area. And the fact that after midday prayers, we will suddenly get a massive influx of people from all over the city. How many of them are going to be, you know, pro-Mubarak supporters versus those who are against remains to be seen. And the most important thing in all this is how is the army going to keep a lid on all of this. Now, you know, the other day when things got very nasty, they effectively stood back. But if things suddenly take a turn for the worse and some of those soldiers find themselves in a difficult position, well then, you know, we could be looking at a very different landscape later on this afternoon.
We'll have to keep our eye on all the latest pictures coming into us here at France 24. Of course, up to 1 million people are expected in Tahrir Square later this afternoon for the biggest rally yet. Well, let's get back to the protests now. A short time ago, we spoke to an anonymous Cairo resident who told us what happened to her when she went out to protest earlier this week.
Yesterday, we were trying to go again to Tahrir Square. We were in Mohammed Farid Square. It's one of the main roads leading to Tahrir Square. A lot of people attacked us while we were in the car. They opened the 4 doors. They had a knife and a lot of weapons. They were wearing like citizens, but we guessed from their way of talking to us that they were from the police. And they took everything from us. They arrested my husband and give him to the soldiers there. They took my laptop, my camera, and they were screaming to us. And it was like crazy. We told them that this food is for us, it's not for people for Tahrir. And it was true. There was a lot of our friends living there, their homes was there. They didn't have any water or any food. They ignored us, and they told me to take the car and to leave now.
And where are you now?
I'm at home now, and all the roads were closed yesterday, and they every 2 minutes there was like checkpoints, and they were like searching the car again and again.
And can you leave your home now?
No, I can't leave my home because I'm not. I'm Egyptian. My husband is only Egyptian, and they are taking everyone.
Well, in recent days, more and more pro-government supporters have been taking to the streets to counter the anti-government demonstrations. The army has been working to separate the two sides, but it's not always possible.
Anti-Mubarak supporters in their thousands continue with their cries for the president's resignation. Here, the protesters blocked the entrance to a metro station by positioning a small truck at its entrance. It was from this stairwell that Egyptians loyal to Mubarak had previously arrived, an access that has now been cut.
There are thugs. They had knives. They want to kill everyone here. They don't want us to speak freely. They want to cut our tongues out.
At entry points surrounding Tahrir Square, makeshift checkpoints have been set up. Everyone needs to prove they are not the enemy. And when a pro-Mubarak individual is spotted, the crowd go hysterical.
It's an officer of state security.
The badge shows the man is employed by the Ministry of the Interior. Written on the stomach of this wounded and exhausted man are his name and his rank. He's a colonel of state security. Then one protester calls the last number dialed on the man's cell phone. It's a high-ranking officer who answers the call.
Who are you?
Could I speak with the officer, please?
Tell me who you are.
Then the officer at the other end hangs up.
Man is what we call raid in the police, in the secret police, and the third man in the corner is Abin Shorta,
which is a soldier of lower rank. Back in Tahrir Square, suspicious Egyptians continue in their study of each other, wanting to determine which side the other is on.
Well, if you're just joining us here on France 24, we are giving you all the very latest on the developments from Cairo in Egypt. These are the latest pictures coming from the capital, in fact, from Tahrir Square, which has been the scene of recent protests over the last week or so. Joining me here in the studio to discuss what's going to be happening today is our international affairs editor, Annette Young. Today, as Friday prayers are coming to a close in Egypt at the moment, we're going to see a lot more protesters descending on that central square. All eyes are going to be on the army, on how they deal with this situation, because they play a pivotal role in this, don't they?
They certainly do, and they've been basically a neutral party, both metaphorically and literally, in the last 10 or so days. And part of that has come from, I suspect, a lot of pressure from Washington. There are very close ties between the US and the Egyptian military at very senior levels. In fact, the Egyptian military chief of staff was in Washington at the time when the protests first began. And they're talking to one another on a regular basis, in which they're talking about the need for restraint, because they understand that the army, once it gets involved, this will become a very different crisis indeed. It will, and this is the problem. There's another element in all this. There's also the state security services, who are much more closely aligned to President Hosni Mubarak, and they in turn would like the army to enforce some form of serious crackdown. So they're coming under pressure both from the state security services, from no doubt hardline factions from within the army, as well as those younger members who very much sense the public spirit and do not wish to be in a position where they're having to turn their guns on to members of the public.
Well, let's talk about the divisions within the army for a moment, because there is very likely going to be some kind of split.
I think that there already is, and there's been, just reading last night on the web, there's been a bit of discussion among analysts about the nature of the military and the fact that there is definitely a generational split between the old guard, literally, and the younger members. The younger members being very aware of the fact that that they are effectively the buffer between these two opposing groups, and also very cognizant of the fact that President Mubarak is, not at all popular, despite what he might think, among many of his fellow Egyptians, and that the time has come for some sort of leadership or regime change. But the other thing, of course, is the army is not meant to be there for street control either. I mean, it's interesting what our correspondent was saying earlier, that they've got rid of the tanks and they're now using smaller vehicles, because when it comes to crowd control, you don't want to be manoeuvring a large American-built tank in a tiny street with lots of people, because inevitably casualties occur, and that's not what the army wants. That is the role, of course, normally of the police, but the police are nowhere to be seen. So it's put the army in an incredibly difficult position, and again, at the danger of repeating myself, this is why Washington is liaising very closely with them, because they know that they are indeed